Hello, everybody. I think Matt's done a good job with the introductions there. I'm really coasting on that book. That was 3 years ago. I should probably do something else. And hello, Jack. This isn't the first time we've spoken. I didn't mention this to you a minute ago, but it's just occurred to me now. You were marshalling at the Two Memorials race, right?
Yeah.
So you probably got a couple of pretty incoherent words from me at some point as I schlepped past in the rain.
Quite possible, yeah.
That's a good race. Everyone should put it on their calendar. Thanks for joining us. Can you just tell us where you are at the minute?
I'm in my truck camper that I live inside, and I'm in Mammoth Lakes, California, which I believe is the snowiest inhabited place on the planet right now. But the way California weather is, I have a strong feeling that we've got about 20 feet of snow on the ground, 15 feet of snow on the ground, and I think we might have gotten our snow for the next couple of months. I think it's just going to be high pressure for the next month or two. So yeah.
You've got all the snow that the Alps don't have, I think.
Yeah, they shipped it all over here.
So what are you up to? Your ski season right now, right?
Yeah. So I guess a couple reasons why I'm in Mammoth. I mean, so Mammoth is in central eastern California. It's on the east side of the Sierra Nevada mountains. And what's really incredible about the Sierra Nevada is there's basically, for at least several hundred miles, I don't even know how high, there is no road crossings of the mountains in the winter. I mean, even in some areas, in many areas, even in the summer, there's no road crossings. There's no people that kind of live within the interior of the mountain range. So it's a huge area that's completely inhabited. Many mountains have probably never been summited in the winter, and so it's a really cool spot. The reason I'm here in particular is because it's a good place to sleep at altitude. So I'm sleeping at like 8,500 feet every night, which is decent for the U.S. You can sleep higher in Colorado, but California also has a very safe snowpack from an avalanche perspective. So it's also a safe place to ski, especially if you ski a lot by yourself, whereas Colorado is extremely dangerous. So yeah.
Cool. Is through the winter all your training's on skis? You've presumably got some ski objectives for this winter.
Yeah. So things everything. Like yeah. So that was on Mount Hood last year, doing the round trip. The ascent FKT on Mount Hood usually is done in track spikes, but what's tricky about the records in the Pacific Northwest is Mount Hood I think is a little over 11,000 feet high. 11,500 I think, and there's very few settlements in the Pacific Northwest that are over 3,000 or 4,000 feet, and so nobody is very acclimatized. So made it a bit easier coming up from California, sleeping at 9,000 feet every night for about a month, and then was able to get the ascent and the round trip records there, just in the same effort there. But yeah, so what I'm looking at first is Mount Shasta is a 14,000 foot volcano in Northern California, and it's one of my favorite mountains and favorite places to train in the world. And I tried for the round trip record last year and was on skis. And while I was descending, I snapped both of my skis in half on some rime ice. I mean, really, it was like, if you see behind me in this photo, there's that kind of cauliflower chicken head kind of ice formations on the wall there. It was just like that. I mean, it was just wind blasted around like 13.8 on Mount Shasta, and I just was going down it and I just snapped both skis in half. It wasn't all that dramatic, but it was quite unpleasant, and it was quite expensive also. So
yeah, I mean, it's not very good for performance, right? Like having two broken skis.
Not good for performance. And Shasta, I think this whole rain event that California is experiencing, all of that fell as snow on Mount Shasta. So I think there's probably about, I don't even know, at 12,000 feet, they've probably gotten over 20 feet of snow in the last month, at least in the last 3 weeks or so. So yeah, once the roads kind of open up there, which might still be another week, I'm gonna head up there. So to redo that record attempt. So
we'll move on to running in a second, I promise. But I want to satisfy my curiosity on something first. I read something you wrote about all the ski records that you'd done last winter, and you spoke about going up before your attempts to put in like a ski track and a boot track on the steeper sections, like essentially like preparing the mountain for a faster ascent, right? Because you can skin faster on compacted snow than on loose snow. How well established are the sort of style guidelines around ski FKTs? Is that something that this is just the done thing, or are there different people who approach it in different ways?
To be honest, there isn't a lot of standard because nobody really does it. I attempted to do that. So the only place I was really able to do that, I guess Mount Talak and Mount Shasta were two mountains I raced last year where I was able to do that. I was able to put in a boot pack. Yeah, there isn't much of a precedence on Hood. I kind of attempted to do that, but there were so many. I mean, Hood is just right next to Portland. There's so many people that climb it that whatever I did was like completely destroyed and was aided by like what other people had did. So like up this head wall right below what I'm about to ski, you know, people had put in a really good boot pack there. So I mean, there wasn't really much for me to do. But no, so as far as style for these ski records, there isn't really much precedent even, and often I'm just kind of making it up, or you know, I'm asking like the couple of people who have set records like this, I'm asking kind of what they think. So yeah.
You mentioned style for ski records. That's a strong look. It looks like a scene from Jackass. Like,
yeah,
I'm Johnny Knoxville, and this is losing 3 square feet of skin.
Yeah, it is funny because like I didn't really know when I did the Hood thing, like that became the focus, was like the outfit I did it in. And you know, I don't know, like I never, when I was going into it, I felt a little stupid, you know. The only time I felt dumb was warming up in the parking lot because I threw a t-shirt on, but I just had like running shoes and my underwear on, and I was like running around the parking lot, and all these people were like getting ready to go like climbing and skiing, and I'm like, you know, just like jogging around. I felt a little dumb, but then like once I got over to the Skinner, like I felt fine, and then afterwards, like, you know, people are very interested in the look. But I mean, I wore the same outfit basically on Shasta, and it's just like with these mountains in the Pacific Northwest, like if you're not in the wind, especially like here, you can see there's like some concavity to the slope, and it just becomes like a solar oven, and it is objectively like unbelievably hot, like even if you're not trying to move really fast.
This is a temperature management thing for you, right? It's not like you've been in the gym and you think you look good. Like this is you.
Yeah.
You've thought this through. There are performance implications for dressing like this.
Yeah. No, 100%. And like, I intend, something I did years ago when I did a running record in the Northeast was, before I started, like I took a bunch of like stuff. I had these big like cool packs, you know, that you put in a freezer, and I had them in my freezer in my truck because I was running this in the summer. And then I like laid them out on my bed, and I laid down for like 20 minutes, and I was like absolutely freezing. I mean, because I was running in the summer and I knew I was going to be hot, and I knew especially this initial climb was going to be hot. So I started it like super cold, and that's not something I've really done. I didn't really do that this last year, but I do intend to do it now. I mean, I'm just gonna, like, before I do Shasta, I'll just probably put on like rain pants and a rain jacket and just like go lie in the snow for like 30 minutes prior till I'm like really cold and then start.
I mean, this is kind of a cutting edge area of performance science. Like, you're doing it in your own way, right? But we saw loads of this sort of stuff at the Tokyo Olympics, people wearing like those ice vests before time trials at the Tour de France, all that sort of stuff. Like, it's the big thing.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I'm lucky, like in the US, the races, a lot of the ultras and the trail races are so hot that heat management is like a big conversation here. So it's a little bit more, I think, top of mind than it would be if I was like living in the UK. And but like in the UK, it's problematic because like a lot of the rounds are like above tree line, and so you're in the sun the whole day. So even if the temperature's not very high, it's like very hot. Yeah.
You've dragged us onto running. That's good. I'm sure a lot of people are relieved. You're a relative newcomer, right? You started running some ultras 4 or 5 years ago, like tail end of 2019. You did like 5 or 6 races, right? Since then, you've been more or less exclusively, well, you have been exclusively focused on record setting FKTs. You've done a bunch of stuff in the States. You've come to Scotland. You've been to the Lake District. You've done some stuff in Bosnia. What do you get from like the FKT side of things that you don't get from running?
I think the number one thing is like with FKTs, I can like commit myself 100% to a route and really focus on like squeezing my best performance out on that route. And so I think if I were to do races, it would be compromised by like 2 things. Like primarily in a race, like you're trying to win the race and not necessarily just get the fastest time. I mean, of course, I could just adjust my goals and just, go and try to get the fastest time. But another thing is, especially in the US, like course records often come down to just like what the weather, what the temperature and what the conditions are like underfoot, especially with like the mountain races that I'm like really interested in. And then another thing, if I was in the UK, it would be a little bit different, but in the US, like our environmental protections are extremely strong. And so, you guys have like obviously the Ben Nevis race. We would like never, it's like inconceivable to have like a race like up and down like Mount Whitney or something, the highest mountain in the lower 48. So a lot of our races tend to be on land where permitting is possible. So our like steepest, fell kind of races or kind of mountain races are, at ski resorts, which I have absolutely no interest in running up and down a ski resort. And those are like the races that are kind of like championed in the media and are like extremely popular. And then I think like for a lot of these, like I'm drawn to like really like beautiful like locations and terrain, and not just to like what some like race director arbitrarily put together. And I think like races are much more kind of achievement and whatever in a race is much more fleeting, because even if you were to get a course record and stuff, like courses change. Like a lot of times like the UTMB course is different year to year. So I think it's, I mean, for a variety of reasons. And I think I also have like some deep seated like anti-authoritarian issues from like being in the military. So I'm a little bit hesitant to like, listen to anybody or like get involved in a race where I'm being remotely told what to do. So, yeah.
I mean, do you find it easier to plan your season because you can do things when you want, or does that make it harder because you don't have like fixed dates? You're waiting for weather, you're waiting for the right conditions or whatever.
I think it's in some ways it's easier to plan because like, everybody I know on the traditional racing scene, like their calendar is more or less like fixed for the year, like right now that they're entering races, they're getting in off lotteries, they're applying for stuff, they're doing races to qualify for other races. Whereas like I didn't plan on doing the Tranter or the Bob until like a month before either one. And that's, so I think that's nice. But on the other hand, like some stuff like that I'm racing this year, like just may never come into condition. And you just have to be like really flexible. And that's and that can be like enormously frustrating. Like I'm like, so a lot of times I'll be like so jealous of people who can just like put a date on their calendar and just race. Whereas like it makes tapering much harder. It makes training much harder. It makes it like 99% of my stress going into these efforts is just around like weather and conditions, like especially, and I keep fucking complaining about it. And then I keep progressively getting into things that have more and more limited, condition and weather windows. Like This photo was from like when I ran like the Shasta like ascent record right before I did it. Like, so that's Shasta right behind me. And I mean, that one was super tricky because like the route was like about to completely melt out. And I thought there would be a window later in the season, and the route was about to melt out. And so I was basically forced to do it when I was, and it had received a couple fair amount of snow in the previous days. And I was like, I DM'd probably 50 people on Instagram. Like I was looking like I would look like, hashtag, like, Mount Shasta location tags, Shasta summit tags, like absolutely anything I could find, like Strava segments. I have like Strava segments that I've like put around the Western US that are just like start and finish like 10 feet outside the parking lot.
Oh, we just lost Jack. That is unfortunate. Hopefully we can get Jack back. I'll text him. Apologies for this, everyone. Matt, if you can keep an eye out for Jack coming back into the chat, that would be
I'm looking now.
That would be great. We can just look at pictures of him.
There is a Jack. There is a Jack, but it just says Jack. I don't know if that is the Jack or a different Jack.
I mean, that Jack might be interesting. We could just
yeah, he could take over.
See if he's got anything to say about the Manchester record. Right, I'm texting him.
Right, I'm just unmuting this Jack, but I don't think this is the same Jack because we didn't admit him into the he would have gone back into the waiting room when he relogged in. No, it's not Jack. Okay, thanks for letting us know, Jack. Bear with us, everybody. We'll wait for him to hopefully rejoin us. Maybe the wall of snow. When we were talking to him earlier, he opened the window to his van and showed us like a 10-foot wall of snow outside the van. So, oh, here we go. He's back. So perhaps the wall of snow has kind of collapsed on his van. I'm just letting him back in. He's obviously having some sort of issue because it's taken a second to rejoin, but he is joining. Bear with us. Who's Jason said you missed your shot at stardom there, Jack. I think so too. I think you should have attempted to carry that off.
Do the accent and everything.
Well, you could have come back on, claimed that the camera was broken, and talked in an American accent and seen how long before we figured it out. Okay, I think he's now in the room, so I just need to turn his camera on for him. No, he's not. He's obviously having some bandwidth issue, which is strange because he was talking to us. So bear with us, guys. Anyone got any questions for Ally whilst we're here?
That's it.
You know, it's probably or Anna's lurking in the background. She's currently training for the spine race, not the winter spine, the summer spine.
So she's leaving it late to train if she's still training 3 days into the race. This is unfortunate.
I was going to say, is anybody dot watching? Anyone know anyone doing it?
Dot watching. I've got the dots open in a separate tab. I'm going to be updating my spreadsheet during this talk, I think. Yeah. Oh, here we go.
He's back again. He's back again. So, oh, okay. Right. Let's see. Come on this time. That was a lot quicker. So, hang on.
Hopefully this works, or I'm going to have to start reading some of my poems.
There we go. Just made him a co-host. We should be back with us momentarily.
Your van looks different, Jack.
I changed location. I don't really know what I did there with the Wi-Fi, but I just went to Starbucks. We're all good.
Well,
anyways,
thank you, Starbucks.
I was just spraying like I've got like all these segments around the Western US that like start and finish like 10 feet outside the parking lot. Just that's way like everybody who starts the route trips it. And then I could go through and like ask them in the comments what the conditions were like. And the first like 50 people can ignore me. And then, you know, somebody responds or like photos or anything else. So
like a low budget version of The Wire.
Yeah. No, exactly. So yeah.
That's that. I like that you put thought into this. I mean, being an FKT focused athlete, right? One problem I imagine you have is choice, because you can go on fastestknowntime.com and here's, you know, even in the US, just thousands and thousands of routes. How do you choose what you're going to put your time into? What makes an appealing route for you?
Yeah, so I think it has to be, I kind of like divide my year up into kind of like passion projects and kind of like more competitive efforts. And so like the passion projects are things that I feel like should be competitive and are like really aesthetic, really like great routes. So, you know, they have like some cultural significance. You know, they're beautiful, you know, kind of like areas to run in. They're like very good underfoot, or they're like really good to ski. And then I have my other ones, which are just like efforts maybe that are that, and then they're also like are very competitive. So like this last year, like the Tranter, the Bob, Shasta Ascent, Hood round trip, like those were all like very competitive and also like very aesthetic records. And then kind of more the passion projects were like Mount Taalock is like the most popular ski tour and the most prominent mountain right on Lake Tahoe in Northern California. And I felt like it deserved a very fast record, you know, deserved a good effort on skis. But it had no history of it. And so I just went out and just like did it as hard as I could. And yeah, and I think like one person else in the world, like it was funny because like I did it and then I like messaged the guy, this big like local ski organizer like in the Tahoe area. And I was like, hey, do you know if there's a record, you know what the time record is for skiing, you know, Mount Taalock? And he was like, oh, you know, the slowest time with the most enjoyment. And, you know, he was like clearly annoyed that I went out and raced it. So like, yeah, nobody gave a fuck. But the Taalock record, the Shasta round trip record on skis, like no one had really done that much for time. And then like the 100-mile route I did in New Hampshire didn't really have a fast record on it. So I think those are kind of how I split it up. But yeah, it is a little bit tricky for me because like the Bob is kind of like, you know, the I want to say the Super Bowl, but I don't know. I don't think you guys could relate to that analogy. Is kind of like, you know,
the Challenge Cup final.
Yeah. That of you know, kind of like mountain running FKTs. And so it's a little bit tricky to like do that and be like, okay, like, you know, now where do I go from there?
Well, how did you end up coming over to the UK, right? You're in a country with multiple mountain ranges, thousands of miles long, and you come to the Lake District and Loch Aber.
Yeah. So the problem is with the US is like the East Coast has like really good underfoot. Like it's very similar to like the fell running in the UK, honestly. Whereas the Western US, you have trails that are primarily graded for pack animals and never really exceed 10% in grade and are very non-technical. And then when you venture off those trails, it's, you know, grade 1, you know, I'm trying to think UK grades. It's grade 1 or harder, you know, scrambling just constantly. They're not as much. The routes are either like climbing routes or they're like very non-technical running routes. Like I'm speaking very generally. There are exceptions to that. So what I originally intended to go out to the Western US, but I'm not very comfortable yet on the scrambling. I'm more comfortable now, but last summer I wasn't. But I was going to go out and do the hard rock course for time, and I was very concerned about the smoke. Like I got done with the route in New Hampshire like in mid-June, and so I felt like I have to take like 2 months to recover before I do another 100-mile route, and that's like mid-August, and that's like peak smoke out west. So that was kind of what drew me instead to the UK. I mean, I knew Finley had done like a bunch of like FKTs up there, and I knew there was like a good depth of competition up there, so it made sense. And like someday I wanted to do the Bob, but I didn't think it'd be anytime soon. So that photo is from the 100-mile thing I did in New Hampshire, and that's like on top of Mount Washington, which is like highest mountain in the Northeast. It's like 6,200 feet. It's like honestly, it's like very similar to. It honestly reminds me a lot of Ben Nevis.
There's a short video on YouTube of your run, right? It's just a few minutes, but I think it gives a really good impression of what the terrain is like.
Yeah. It's funny. So when I was running in the UK, I felt very good at like running on, steep terrain and everything. And I looked at my time on the 100-miler, and I was like, wow, I think I could take that time much faster. And I just forgot how technical, like how much more technical New Hampshire is, even than the UK. It would be like if you did 100 miles of like Ben Nevis to like Conmore without like the exposure, but like the rockiness is what it was like. Especially like the descent off Ben Nevis to that col before Conmore. It's like that the whole way. I paced somebody in October on the route, and I was like, oh my God, I don't think I could ever do this again. Like it is. If anybody's looking for a hard 100-miler or a hard thing to do, there's like few things I think harder than that. It is absolutely horrendous. It's so bad.
So at what point did you start to think that the BG was feasible then?
When I was doing the Tranter for time, because I didn't really even know how feasible me doing Finley's Tranter was. And then as I was doing the Tranter and doing quite well, I started to think like, oh, I'd already thought before that, like Finley had done the Tranter like 3 or 4 times. So I felt like his Tranter time was, a better representation of his best effort than his Bob time, because he only did the Bob once. And he also knew the Tranter much better. And so I felt like if I could beat his Tranter time, then I could probably beat his Bob time. And if I could beat his Bob time, then I may be able to beat Kilian's time is basically all it. And I think if you were to do the math, like me beating his Tranter time by 14 minutes, and him being 7 minutes short of Kilian, and I think you can kind of like, I think my time, I think 12:30 kind of makes sense. But like obviously going into the Bob, I wasn't like, oh, this will be hunky dory, 12:30's in the bag, it was not like that.
You'd run the course, not in a oneer obviously, but you'd run all the legs multiple times. Had you been trying to run them at record pace?
No. So that was like a decision I made after the Tranter, was like, I like very much paid attention to Finley's splits, and I paid attention to them too much. And then in training, I was like arguably pushing too hard because I always had these fucking splits on my mind, and I never try to hit the split exactly. But I'd always like, okay, I'm going to go like 10% slower or something. It would still end up being too fast. And I was always thinking about it. So like for the Bob, I was like, the best confidence I have is like my Tranter time. And like, I'm just going to waste my time and scare myself if I try to run Kilian splits prior to doing it, which I don't know. I think it was a good idea. Yeah, I think it worked out, fine. So I think it was a good idea.
I mean, that's almost a segue into training. My understanding of your training is that you have a fairly simple structure for your week, right? You have a rest day or an easy day. You do one higher intensity session a week, and then the next, how many days does that leave? 5 days. You're more or less just accumulating volume in the mountains. Is that more or less accurate?
Yeah, that's it. Like literally all I do. I think like the problem is with like run training is like or training for anything is like there's no money and in telling somebody just to like run aerobically a lot. And like for 99.99% of people, like that's the best answer is like there's like the company I coach for, you can Google like how to do a heart rate drift test, do a heart rate drift test with a chest strap because the wrist heart rate's, fucking garbage, and just determine what your top of your zone 2 is. And then just run slower than that and don't increase your volume by more than 10% in a week. And just literally do that. And like, that's like 99.999% of training right there. And, once you get a huge aerobic base over a couple of years, then it's like, I think speed work starts to make sense. But Kilian has a really good interview with Steven Seiler on YouTube. And he talks about how like he was training, 4 Sierras and all, 4 short distance stuff, doing probably, 2 speed workouts per week. And he had this, one mountain that he always time trials in Norway. And he set his PR on it right before Sierras and all. And then he did a couple months after, the end of the season, he did a couple months of just aerobic training. So zone 1, zone 2 only. And he went and he time trialed the mountain, and his time had only, decreased by 16 seconds after a couple months of just doing aerobic work. So I think like speed work, because it is a way to sell training plans, is like vastly overemphasized. But yes, that is my training. I typically, if I'm not tapering or I'm not taking an easy week or something, really, if I'm not tapering, or if I'm not taking like, the couple of weeks like down after after the end of my season, or maybe like after a really hard effort, then generally I'm trying to hit like 24 hours a week. And so it's just one speed workout on the treadmill or incline treadmill or Stairmaster. And then I just try to just check, 23 hours more of running or skiing moving time. And
why the Stairmaster? How did you end up doing that?
Well, so I'd prefer to use a treadmill, but it's like, I've only been to 2 gyms in the United States that have incline treadmills that go over 20%. And like 25 to 30%, I think, is like the best grade for like a mountain runner to do speed work on. And so that's where I prefer to do all my speed work, but Stairmasters are much easier to find than incline treadmills. And Stairmaster is like, a 70, 80% equivalent. And Stairmaster really, the only problem I have with the Stairmaster, it really is 2 issues. Number one, you can't be very precise with the speeds. It'd be like an incline treadmill. You can only go and adjust by, half a mile an hour or something, or a mile an hour. And so you can't be very precise. And honestly, like I've kind of like ran like the Stairmaster just doesn't go fast enough for me anymore. And so that's kind of another problem. But so I have to like add weight, and that's like really fucking annoying because then you get really hot. So because you have this like weight vest holding all this heat against your body. So I prefer the incline treadmill. The other thing about the Stairmaster though is it really well replicates the motion of like steep uphills in New Hampshire and in upstate New York, where it basically is like rock steps, almost like, the same would apply to the Lake District or Le Cobber. So yeah, I think the Stairmaster is a good tool. It's just more accessible, but the incline treadmill, I think, is the best if you can find a steep one.
I should mention that there's a link in your Instagram bio. You've got a Google Doc that lists, I think, all the harder sessions you did in last year. Is it all of them from last year?
I think it goes back to the beginning of 2020.
Oh, wow. Okay, even better.
Yeah.
And there are some interesting notes in there comparing different brands of step machine. Like they have different step heights and they run at different speeds. I'm starting to get better at it, but it's like there's nothing worse than like what I've had the worst workouts I've ever done in my entire life. So I guess one caveat to all of this is, yes, there is huge discrepancies between Stairmasters, and there's also huge discrepancies between treadmills, which is like very problematic. If I just lived in a house, I would probably just like, shell out the money to buy an incline treadmill. So that way I'm always using the same one and I can calibrate it, because like there's big discrepancies between just over time treadmills lose their calibration. You can Google like treadmill calibration. It's like a big problem. So yeah, with those workouts, I do have to, be a bit flexible, because I know I have to like be able to adjust the paces on the fly, because I might go and do a workout on a treadmill that's not been calibrated properly. Or the worst workouts I've ever done have been when I try to take paces on a Stairmaster and apply it from one machine to another. And some of the machines just have the step height will be half an inch higher.
And when the
Do you
step
take a
height
measuring tape with you so you can check?
No, I just look at the manufacturer's brochure, but still, like, they have like weird metrics. Like they'll have like sometimes the step height will be higher, but the step on height will be lower. And it's just like, I don't know what this stuff means, but like, I mean, I also probably recognize that like the way they measure steps per minute is probably different. And like all of this stuff, it's just like, 1% different. If it's a half an inch difference, like when you're trying to do a speed workout, like right at probably the limit of what you're capable of. Yeah, it can be pretty painful. Yeah. I had this happen in May before the before the 100. And I remember I realized about halfway through, I was like, okay, this Stairmaster is not calibrated the same. And I was like, but like, fuck it. Like, I'm just gonna gut through it. And I don't know what happened exactly, but like, I like had to lay down for like 4 or 5 hours afterwards. Like I felt like I had the flu. Like I had like chills all over my body. I was like nauseous. Like probably not a great. I mean, I can get away with it for whatever reason. I mean, maybe I'll like burn out doing that, but like I can get away with like doing my speed work that hard, and like feeling okay the next day. But like, yeah, that was like brutal. That was like, okay, that was too far. I can't do that again. Yeah.
That's yeah, I've done some treadmill sessions, and I couldn't do it every week. I think
I think it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. I really like it.
Because you're doing this in mountainous places, right? Like when you were in up in La Habra, when you were in the Lake District, you're going to the gym to use the Stairmaster.
Yeah. And like, yeah, that's just once a week. And then the other thing is the reason why it's important, especially in the US, less so over there, but especially in the Western US, is like, I talk to people. I talk to like, elites, and they like they'll do their speed work on a mountain, in the Western US. So they live at 6,000 feet. They'll drive to a trailhead at 7,000 feet, and they'll do a speed workout running up a mountain up to 10,000 feet. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, it's going to be, elevation is going to be the altitude is going to be the primary like limiting factor there. Like I live right now in Mammoth. I sleep at 8,600 feet, but they keep closing my parking lot that I get away with sleeping in because of like avalanches. So like this morning they kicked me out at like 6 a.m. I mean, you're not supposed to sleep in there. So yes, they kicked me out this morning, but usually between 82 and 86 is where I'm sleeping right now. And yesterday I had to drive like literally like an hour and a half. I mean, certainly not the best move environmentally, driving an hour and a half, mainly because of traffic, down to Bishop at 4,000 feet, do my speed workout, and then drive back up here. So like I don't do all my work down low, but the speed work I do down low, and then I'll do my aerobic work. It doesn't matter as much because the intensity is relatively much lower, but I'll do my aerobic work right now between 85 and like 14,000 feet. So.
Okay. Enough. The BG, how, in terms of record setting, the Bob Graham's a team effort, right? Like no one's going to get close to those sorts of times running solo. You're very obviously not from Cumbria. How did you go about finding pacers?
No. So, it's more than just pacers. It was also like, there were folks that met me out on course with food and water, and like especially with water. And that's something I kind of like I didn't appreciate enough going into it, but like in hindsight, I would have had more people meeting me on course, like non-pacers, with water, just in case we ran out. Like especially on like leg 3, it would have been nice to have, I think, more people out there. And like they don't need to be terribly well trained, they just need to hike up there. So I think that would have made a big difference. But no, so when I first showed up, the first thing Martin Stone and I did, I think Martin might be on here.
I think he probably is, yeah.
Yeah. The first thing Martin and I did was we like sat down and we went through all of like Kilian's and Finley's pacers. And then I was talking about Kilian and Finley so much, I kept like amalgamating their names by accident into Kinley. And then I just like, it like made sense because like I was basically treating them as the same person. But I basically went through all of Kinley's pacers, and then we kind of like were trying to judge who was still running. And then it was, me, Martin, and Tori Miller just going through like all of the fell races, recently in the area, and just kind of trying to ask everybody we felt that might be willing to drive. So yeah, that was kind of a big thing. And then it was like also like going through all like the athletic clubs and everything and just trying to find a fast, people who we felt could hold the pace in each. And then, in the end, what ended up happening is like, I always told everybody I wasn't going to race before September 10th, because I wanted at least like 5 weeks after the Tranter. And, at the end of August, I saw that it was going to be a really good window around the September 2nd, which is a Friday. So a lot of the people I had were only available on the weekends. I felt bad because like after my Tranter, there were like 5 or 6 people that reached out to me and were like, oh yeah, I'd love to support, love to pace, if you do a Bob. And none of those people were available the day I did it. So I wish they could have, made it out. But yeah, so I ended up I went to Two Moors race, and I was like kind of panicking, like asking random people, like, Johnny Cox was like at the finish line. He's like, yeah, I think I've got some races I'm doing next weekend. And I was like, dude, I don't have anybody, like, please. And then Kat Evans was like very helpful in like me like wrangling people. And yeah, I think like people just took pity on like a, sad American guy living in a van, that he wasn't able to get anybody to support him. So like a lot of people did end up like coming out right at the very end, because like I had like 50 or 60 people prior to that. And I messaged everybody, and nobody, like 3 people were available on Friday. And like both, Kinley had like 14 pacers, when they went for it. So
I remember a few years ago, Ryan Smith said that he was going to try and break Billy Brown's record, and was anyone up for pacing him? I think he just posted on like the Fell Runners Association forum.
Oh, okay.
And maybe testament to how highly revered Bland's record was. No one was really interested because they didn't know him. Like, he's from the UK, but he lives in Colorado. Yeah. Most of his good results are in the US. So do you think it was really important for you to have that Tranter's result that you could wave in people's faces and be like, look, I've actually got a chance?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I mean, I had, some degree of trouble getting people, and I think the Tranter is probably the only thing, that saved me. And that's, that's one of the reasons I went to Scotland first. It was because Finley had done all those efforts unsupported. So I was like, perfect. Like, I don't need to get a crew or anything together for these. So that was huge. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I think, yes. Yeah. And I'm very happy, for many reasons, that I did the Tranter too. Like, the Tranter is just an amazing route. And I think even if I had done it backwards, it would have made sense. Like, somehow if I was able to get the support together for the Bob and then gone up and done the Tranter, I think that would have been totally great too. Because the Tranter is like it's a great route. So,
do you have a preference in terms of style? Obviously, when you're setting records, you're just sort of matching the style of your predecessor. But do you get more satisfaction from solo runs than from having all the pacers?
No, dude, honestly, like, I like the supported stuff more. I mean, I hate getting the support is like, pulling teeth and is like gnarly, and it's like really stressful on race day to like make sure everybody's there. But like, the running is just like, I mean, this photo I think says it all. Like, my face versus Matt's face as he's hauling all my water and gels. And so yeah, I mean, I think it is really nice, if yeah, I mean, I think I kind of split it somewhere in the middle on something like ShAFF, though, when I go ski it, or Renier, like, those make sense, more unsupported.
You just don't need the support.
You don't need the support, but like on the, the White's 100 mile thing, like, I wanted to do it Bob style, and I just was unable to get the supporters, really to do it. And I think that's equally because like, the running culture just isn't as popular in the US. Like, everybody who runs in the UK generally is like a backpacker in the US, because like like in the US, like access is much poorer, wilderness areas are much larger. So if you really want to get back there, like backpacking 99% of the time makes more sense. So like the running culture is just like not as deep, it's much bigger. Like obviously the distances are larger. So like for my 100, like people who came and supported me, like, median, they were driving from like an hour or two away. So that makes it way trickier. And just like, there isn't a history of like supported efforts as much in the US. So it's like, yeah, I wish I could have done the 100 like Bob style, but as it was, like, basically my pacers were just there for conversation and I had to carry all my own stuff. So
I mean, in the UK, like, we think that Wasdale is the height of inaccessibility.
Yeah,
it's just an absolute nightmare to get to, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, it ended up like this, right? You were this close to being 30 minutes faster than Kilian. That's, I mean, you were relatively unknown, right? Certainly the contrast between before and after is pretty significant. People in the UK who knew about your tranters knew you had a shot. It presumably had the potential to turn you into a professional athlete. Like, you could have given up the coaching, you could have just had sponsor contracts. You're not really interested, right?
No, not at all.
I mean, what I was actually part of this. I was speaking to Finlay, and he wondered if you had like a vision of a future of the sport, or just this part of the sport that was less influenced by like big brands, big race organizers, what that would look like. Not necessarily amateur, but people who are doing things the way that you're doing them. Do you think that's something that will persist, or do you think it's just going to get swamped by, it'll be the Bob Graham by UTMB?
Yeah, so I think the biggest problem is like the people that like control, everybody is very influenced, certainly doing with myself, by like, the media they consume. And like the media is, controlled by people who race direct races, who have sponsors on their, on their podcasts. I mean, it's certainly in the US. In the US, it's much bigger business. And I think people in the US just have less qualms around, these kind of like traditional ethics. And so, yeah, like the people who are elevated in the sport are, sponsored athletes. The races that are, and the efforts that are elevated in the sport are, big kind of like race events. And my like personal thing with it is like, fundamentally, I think what it is for me is like, I think when I go on like some publication online, like the New York Times, and I don't have a subscription to the New York Times, and there's like advertisements on the side. I guess the New York Times is a paywall, bad example, but like there's advertisements on like many websites. And it's like, okay, like I am being exposed to these advertisements because I am viewing this article, and this is like the contract I have with this publisher. Whereas like when you go on an Instagram page, it's like, I feel like I am gaining from my supporters, it's like the people who follow me. Like that is a relationship where like I am gaining by having them, in my following count, and like, everything else. I feel like I benefit from that. And then for me, and they kind of like view my content, and for me just to like in return, just like bombard them with like advertising, like many American trail runners do. It's like doesn't really feel fair, and it feels like abuse of their attention. And like attention isn't really like looked at as like being monetary, but like, I mean, basically attention is money. And so that's kind of like fundamentally what my thing is. I think I certainly have some issues personally where I think I'm more likely to like be contrarian, even if it's not the right thing to do. So I think I got to like suss that out in myself. But I think honestly, at the end of the day, like if I was sponsored, I would put in probably about 90% of the effort that I do now, because I feel like anytime I were to go that extra mile and drive down to Bishop, an hour and a half, do my speed workout, drive all the way back, and pay for the gas, just to sleep at 8,600 feet. I feel like if I was sponsored and I was like, punching the clock as like a Hoka athlete, I would not waste my time doing that, because like, for me, it's like I race, for one reason, and that's because I like to be able to just like commit myself like holistically and 100% to like one thing, just to like get one metric, the time, lower. And I feel like if I was like, punching the clock at, Adidas or something, I wouldn't, I would be like, whatever, like, fuck it. So yeah, I mean, I think it would be great if more people were kind of like into FKTs, like especially you guys in the UK are a little bit different because like your fell racing scene is pretty low key. And then you have like, there is like, some international influence, but you guys have there's a really good balance. In the US, that balance doesn't exist. It's all, monetized, and it's much bigger, and FKTs aren't the same level. And, there are large podcasts in the US that, not to sound ridiculous, that I feel like, these people should engage with me, or like there are large figures in media in the US that I know deliberately do not engage with me because I don't align with their vision for the sport. And, you have a lot of people that, get all their news from these podcasts, and they're like, okay, this is the way trail running is done. I got to sign up for like, I got to spend $300 on a fucking race and, go out and like listen to some fucking race director prattle on for like an hour before the gun goes off. And like, I'm there with 500 million other people. So, yeah.
There was a comment Martin Stone made, I think it was Martin, apologies Martin if it wasn't you, somewhere about how the Fell Runners Association publicity department exists to ensure that fell running doesn't get too much publicity.
Yeah.
Which I really appreciate. I quite like that. I'm a fan of that.
Yeah.
We should probably think about finding an end for this conversation. I've just you did an interview with I Run Far recently, and I've got it on my phone here because I just wanted to check that you had said publicly that you were interested in the Lakeland 24-hour record.
Yeah.
So what you obviously enjoyed your experience racing in the lakes, and you're keen for more, right?
I don't know, like when I was when I was there after I did the Bob, like it was really interesting. Like I couldn't go out and like run in the fells. Like I took it was like I did the Bob so early in the season, the beginning of September. The mountain running season is like so short, especially in the US, because it's flanked by snow and wildfires. And like there still was more of the season left. Like I could have, there was a really, really good weather window end of September into October in the Northeast. And there are still some things I'd like to race in the Northeast. And so initially I started training in the UK, like I was going to go back and race in the US. And I was like going out and running in the fells, and like I couldn't do it. Like I couldn't look up and like, see Skidda and just like I got a headache, it was just torturing me. So I actually I went up to like the super, like I like bought a membership at the Underscar like resort there, which was like so fucking expensive because I wanted to use their sauna prior to the Bob. And so I just like went there, and I would just like go and run on the treadmill at 18% for a couple hours every day, because I just couldn't bear to look at the fells anymore. So who knows, maybe that trauma will have like left my head by the time.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, well, whatever. I mean, I think I'll get over it eventually. They say like the best quality for a good alpinist is a bad memory. So you just gotta forget how horrible it was. So like, yeah, I gotta, maybe I've talked about in 2024, Trophy Okima will be back. Maybe like Pyramenta, the ski race.
Kima.
Yeah.
Kima is mind blowing. It's incredible.
Yeah. So I mean, who knows? And then maybe come to the UK. But,
I mean, you mentioned earlier the bit about how the West Coast is all like 10% trails, then scrambling. You spent a long time. Was it in Boulder in the autumn? On the flat irons, doing loads of scrambling there. Was that with a view to potentially taking on records that incorporate that sort of terrain?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was the idea. So like in the US, like there are a number of records that are very, very classic and are like extremely competitive that do incorporate fifth class. And like I would say the easiest among them is like the Wasatch Ultimate Ridgeline Cup, the Whirl outside of Salt Lake City. Very similar stats to the Tranter, but just like much more technical, which has a little bit of fifth class YDS. I'm trying to think of what that would be. UK, like I don't know, grade 2, 1C maybe. I think that's UK. But and then like Long's Peak is like 5.5 YDS, like 90 feet of it, and then Grand Teton is like 5.3 YDS, but it's like more exposed and sustained. So Yeah, I mean, who knows?
Steve in the chat is asking if Finley's Coolin Ridge record is on your radar at all.
Yeah, so I went up to the Coolins right before the Bob, and it was like fantastic. But like, yeah, I just didn't have the head then for scrambling. I think now I am a lot better after doing that pretty intensively for 6 weeks. Yeah, I'd say certainly possibly. Just like the weather is just kind of finicky there, and I certainly would want to get out and scout it for a while. But I still think like all this shit, like certainly the Grand, probably the Coolin, probably even Longs are still like I'm not quite comfortable. Like there's a dude here, Kyle Richardson, who might come over to the UK next summer and is maybe looking at the Coolin. And nice. Maybe looking at like the Bob Graham, like the climbing version that I think Shane Oley did. Maybe am I crazy?
The classic rock round.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, I can do a lot of the shit he does, that he's done on FKTs, but like the speed that he scrambles at, especially down climbing, is like is mind blowing. Like I don't know how it's possible, like what he does. So yeah, I mean. When you're, going against him or when he's out there, it's just like, I need to get better at this before I even attempt it. So.
I think that's a really interesting area, like the combination of those two things. I remember a few years ago when Dean Potter broke the record for Half Dome, I think.
Yeah.
Just by taking a completely different route to anyone else. Soloed like 7 pitches of 5.6 or 5.7 or something.
Yeah.
Whereas everyone before him had just gone the trail the whole way up. It's fascinating.
Yeah. No, it's very it's very interesting. Yeah.
So anything else on your radar for this year in the US? Sorry.
In the US, yeah. So I mean, currently the plan is Shasta once it melts out, and then a couple possibly like some like bigger like link up projects like in Utah or in California that would be like less for time and more just for completion. And then end of April, May, I'd like to do like Rainier round trip on skis for time, and then probably straight from there to Denali, which used to be a guy in New Hampshire had the record on skis, and then Kilian broke it on skis, but Kilian had absolutely horrendous conditions, and then Carl Egloff broke it just like running and in snowshoes. And I think that should be a ski record. I've never been up there, but from what it looks like, it should be a ski record. And the fact that Carl has it, I think it's just more of a reflection of how bad Kilian's conditions were. So that, and then I don't know, like, no, I mean, honestly, like, I mean, I don't fucking know. Like, that's like currently is my number one plan, but like, I mean, who knows, like, what conditions will be like, or what other problems I'll face, or maybe I'll just get up there and be like, this is like fucking ridiculous. I've never been that high. So yeah, that, and then, yeah, the Whirl, Wasatch Ultimate Ridge Link Up, and like Mount Whitney, Mountaineers round trip. And then there's like some stuff in the Northeast I'd like to redo because either I made a wrong turn or I had shit conditions, or there's one record up in upstate New York that some guy broke that I'd like to go back and get. So, yeah, I mean, that's a nice thing is I can just kind of do whatever.
You're not short of idea. That's cool.
Yeah. There's some ideas. Yeah, that's throwing them in. Yeah.
Last question. Yeah. Do you fancy the spine race?
No, I don't. It's like not technical enough.
Not technical.
I mean, it's just like I would just get like destroyed, Yeah, I'm just like I'm not.
There are many good reasons not to fancy the spine race, I think.
Yeah. It doesn't look too pleasant. Anything that like, honestly, like anything that like Damian Hall, I want to say that Kim Colason has done. Like that's just. I mean, it sounds like you're transcending like into the mental torture kind of like realm. John Kelly, like fucking forget it. Like honestly, probably if Kelly's doing something, like maybe there'll be a little bit of overlap on like the mentally easiest things that John Kelly does, but like, yeah, like once like one of those three guys does it, of course Kim has a 24-hour record, but
you need waterproof socks. I'm not interested.
Yeah. Anything like people start discussing like, oh yeah, hallucinations, or like, I don't know what else. Like that's like, okay, I'm done. I'm not looking at this.
the right substances, you can do that from the comfort of your van. Like you'll be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. I think, unless anyone has any pressing questions from the chat, Devil's Path FKT in New York.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah, I did that years ago. That was one of the first records I did. I mean, the only thing I regret about that one is like I had a discussion with a number of runners up there, and that record had traditionally been done unsupported. And there was this discussion I had with a number of runners in the Northeast, and everyone kind of concluded like, okay, we think all these records eventually are going to be done supported. Like everything's going towards a supported style, like on all these. So I did the Devil's Path supported, and I broke the unsupported record, but I do wish I did it unsupported. Yeah. So.
Well, it's coming from Aaron Shimon, who I believe lives in New York. So maybe if you're going to go back there, he could help out.
Yeah. No, Devil's Path.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you very much, Jack. That's been I mean, I've got a list of things here. We could be here till midnight, but no, that was educational. I'm gonna go and
thank you.
I'm gonna go dust off the Stairmaster in the corner of the gym tomorrow.
Yeah. No, do it.
See how I get on. Could be a game changer for me.
Yeah, once you kind of get into it.
I mean, it's this far from the wall, right? So
yeah. Well, you get a nice like.
Are you podcasting or just?
No, I always like try to maximize like my distraction. So like if I'm stationary, I'm like watching video. Like if I'm moving, yeah, I'll listen to a podcast. But like, yeah. No, I'm like on TikTok for like 4 hours straight on the Stairmaster every time. Yeah.
Nice, I like it.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Matt.
Hi, thank you. Been sitting here in the background listening intently. Yeah, fascinating. I don't really know what to say about a lot of that. Just kind of it reminds me of Team Sky or whatever it was, GB cycling, where you kind of the marginal gains and kind of the there's just little things that I'd never even thought of lying on ice packs first to bring my temperature down before going for a run. But yeah, fair play to you, guy. Amazing.
Great, yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess you think about this stuff an awful lot, and it shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing else to do in the van other than swipe on Tinder for like 5 hours every night.
Yeah, thank you. Really enjoyed that. I hope everybody has also enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, the fact that Jack doesn't want sponsors but wants to live in his van, I'm pretty sure doesn't mean that he wouldn't appreciate a little bit of money going his way. So just a little reminder that if you haven't already made a donation, or if you've made a donation and you feel like making another one, then Anna has posted the details in the chat, and we will email it out to you as well. So yeah, get those donations coming in, guys, and we will we'll share it across the pond. And
I meant to ask.
Go
on, Jack, are you taking on coaching clients, and if so, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I coached through I used to coach for Uphill Athlete, which was Steve House, the alpinist, and Scott Johnston, the Olympics cross country ski coach, like their company, but uphill split in half. And so I left with Scott, and so now I'm at his new company, Evoke Endurance, and yeah, happy to coach over there. And just like, yeah, thank you to everybody who tuned in. Like, I mean, a huge thank you. Like, if anybody donated, like, that's like insane. So no, yeah, I really appreciate it.
Cool. And yeah, we'll look forward to you hopefully hitting our shores again before too long. Paddy Buckley. Yeah, no, someone said you fancy got the Paddy Buckley. That's on my home turf. So
I talked to like Finley and Martin, and both told me it was like kind of boggy, and so like boggy's on my list of no-goes. But
there's only a bit of it that's boggy. There's only a bit of it that's boggy. Don't listen to them.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Like, yeah,
it's very boggy, that bit.
Yeah, not true. Yeah, no, maybe I'll come check it out. Yeah, why not? I should at least go and run on it just to go see it. So yeah, cool.
Okay, thanks everybody. I'm going to close the meeting. Yeah, if you didn't get any questions answered, then I'm sure you can I think Anna's posted Jack's details, so you can always message him or Ally or myself or Anna, and we'll try and get back to you. And yeah, we'll post this on YouTube tomorrow, so if you're having technical difficulties tonight, then you can watch it again tomorrow. Cheers then.
Thanks, guys.
Good stuff.